They wore the face of someone who had moved on. But moving on requires first admitting you were somewhere to begin with, and that admission was the one thing they were never quite brave enough to make. Every person who has loved an avoidant and lost them to the particular cruelty of their own fear arrives eventually at the same image. The avoidant somewhere out there in their life appearing fine, functioning, moving through their days with the same self-contained composure that defined them throughout the relationship, unbothered, independent, seemingly untouched by the ending of something that cost you everything. They post nothing that betrays grief. They reach out with a casualness that implies you occupy no particular weight in their interior world. They are, by every visible measure, exactly what they always claim to be, someone who does not need much, does not feel deeply enough to be derailed, does not carry the kind of attachment that leaves marks. And you, who are decidedly not fine, look at this image and feel two things simultaneously. The pain of your own grief, raw and present, and refusing to be managed on any convenient timeline. And beneath that, quieter but no less corrosive, the suspicion that the connection you believed was real was perhaps only ever real for you, that what felt like mutual depth was asymmetrical all along, that they are fine because what you shared was not, for them, the profound thing it was for you. This is the story you are telling yourself, and it is wrong, not partially wrong, fundamentally, structurally wrong. And understanding why it is wrong will not necessarily make the grief smaller, but it will make it cleaner. It will remove the particular toxin of self-doubt from a wound that is already difficult enough to heal without it. The avoidant is not fine, but the way they are not fine looks almost nothing like the way you are not fine, and that difference in appearance is the entire reason the illusion holds. Your not fine is visible. It has a texture that other people can see and respond to, a grief that surfaces in your face, your energy, your presence in conversations, the quality of your attention when you are supposed to be somewhere else entirely, but keep finding yourself back in the same internal room, going over the same moments, asking the same unanswerable questions. Your pain has witnesses. It exists in the shared world where it can be acknowledged, met, gradually metabolized through the ordinary human process of being seen in your suffering by people who care about you. The avoidance not fine has no witnesses. It exists exclusively in the private interior of a person who has spent their entire life developing increasingly sophisticated methods of ensuring that their pain remains invisible, first to others, and eventually, with enough practice, almost to themselves. What they are experiencing in the aftermath of losing you is not nothing. It is a great deal of something, but it is something that has been routed away from every conventional channel of expression and forced underground, where it moves through them in forms they may not even consciously connect to you or to the ending of what you shared. Here is what is actually happening inside them. Not as speculation, but as the predictable, well-mapped consequence of avoidant attachment, losing something it was more invested in than it ever allowed itself to acknowledge. The first thing that happens is a period of apparent relief. This is genuine, not performed, not a lie. In the immediate aftermath of the relationship ending, the avoidance nervous system experiences an authentic loosening of the tension that intimacy created, the constant low-grade alarm of being known, of being needed, of having someone's emotional world oriented toward them with a consistency that their attachment system experienced as pressure. That alarm goes quiet, and the quiet feels like peace. They move through the first days or weeks with a lightness that they interpret as confirmation of everything they told themselves throughout the relationship, that the closeness was too much, that solitude is their natural state, that they are fundamentally better alone. They believe this story completely, and for a brief window, the story is experientially true. The relief is real, but relief is not the same as well-being, and the window closes. What follows the relief is something the avoidant is almost entirely unprepared for because their psychological architecture does not include adequate preparation for this particular experience. The absence begins to develop weight, not immediately, and not in any way they would label as missing you. The avoidant's defenses are too well constructed to allow direct acknowledgement that early. But the weight accumulates in the background of their daily experience with a patience that their suppression cannot indefinitely match. It arrives first as restlessness, a quality of unease in moments that should feel neutral or pleasant. The evenings that used to carry the ambient comfort of your existence somewhere in the world oriented toward them. Even if they kept you at distance, the knowledge of your presence was a kind of background warmth they did not register as warmth until it was gone. Now those evenings have a different texture, not dramatically different, not different enough initially to demand examination, just different. A subtle wrongness, like a room where the furniture has been moved slightly. Nothing is missing, but nothing is quite right either. This restlessness does not stay subtle. Over time, in the absence of any genuine processing, which the avoidant will resist with everything they have, it deepens. It becomes a pervasive low-frequency discomfort that follows them through activities, through interactions, through the ordinary progression of a life that should, by the avoidant's own logic, feel free now. It colonizes the spaces where contentment used to live and replaces contentment with a hollowness that has no name they are prepared to give it, because giving it the right name would mean acknowledging what or who it corresponds to. The second thing that is happening, running parallel to the restlessness, is an involuntary and relentless process of comparison. Everyone they encounter now, every person who might represent a potential connection, every individual who displays warmth or interest or the early, uncomplicated pleasantness of someone who does not yet know them well enough to require anything, gets held, without the avoidant's conscious permission, against the specific template of you, not against an idealized version of you, against the actual, specific, irreplaceable quality of what you brought to them, the particular way you understood them before they had finished speaking, the specific texture of your emotional intelligence which navigated their complexity without being defeated by it, the way you could sit inside silence with them and make the silence feel inhabited rather than empty. The quality of your perception, which saw through their performances without using the seeing as a weapon. These are not generic qualities. They are yours. And the avoidant, moving through a world of people who do not possess them in the same configuration, is discovering something they cannot reason their way out of, that you were not replaceable. That the specific combination of qualities you carried is not a common thing, and that finding it again, if finding it again is even possible, would require the kind of luck that does not reliably repeat itself. This discovery does not arrive as a dramatic revelation. It arrives as a grinding, accumulative realization, the slow erosion of the belief that moving on would be straightforward, that someone else would come along quickly enough to fill the space before the space became undeniable. The avoidant believed, and perhaps still believes consciously, that their self-sufficiency protects them from this kind of irreplaceability. Their self-sufficiency does not protect them. It simply means they carry the realization alone, without the release valve of admitting it to anyone. The third thing happening inside the avoidant is the most psychologically significant and the least visible from the outside. They are in the early, resistant, almost certainly unconscious stages of confronting the pattern. Not fully. Not in the way that leads to genuine change without significant external intervention. But the confrontation has begun in the way that all deeply suppressed truths begin their eventual surfacing, not through willingness, but through accumulation, through the weight of evidence becoming too heavy to keep buried beneath rationalization. Because you were not the first person the avoidant lost this way. There is a history here, a pattern of connection followed by retreat, followed by loss, followed by the practiced performance of indifference. And that pattern has been leaving sediment in the avoidance interior world with every repetition. Each loss that was not properly grieved, each connection that was not properly valued until it was gone, each person whose significance was denied until denial was no longer possible, all of it is still in there. Unprocessed, accumulated, waiting. Your loss lands on top of all of it, and the combined weight of it is beginning to press against the floor of the avoidance carefully maintained composure with a force that composure alone cannot indefinitely absorb. They are not having a breakdown. They may never have a visible breakdown. The avoidance capacity for containment is genuinely extraordinary, but something is moving in them. Something is shifting at a foundational level that their surface presentation cannot accurately report on. The performance of fine is becoming increasingly expensive, and performances that become too expensive eventually become impossible to sustain. There is also something happening in the avoidance relationship with their own identity that deserves direct examination, because it is one of the least discussed aspects of what avoidants experience after losing someone significant. The avoidant self-concept, their understanding of who they are, their pride in their self-sufficiency, the quiet but deeply held belief that their independence is a form of strength rather than a symptom of fear, takes damage in the aftermath of a loss like this, because the evidence, if examined honestly, does not support the self-concept. A person who is genuinely self-sufficient and genuinely at peace with solitude does not feel this particular restlessness, does not find that evenings have changed texture, does not discover that the world is populated, suddenly and inconveniently, with reminders of a specific person's specific absence. Genuine self-sufficiency is not disturbed by loss in this way, and the avoidant, who has organized their entire identity around the belief in their own self-sufficiency, is now living inside evidence that quietly, persistently contradicts that belief. This creates a crisis of self-concept that the avoidant handles the way they handle all internal crises, through suppression and rationalization, and the aggressive redirection of attention toward anything that does not require them to sit with the uncomfortable question of whether the story they have told about themselves is entirely true. But suppression is not resolution, and the question, once it has been posed by experience, does not disappear simply because it is not being consciously engaged with. It waits, with the patience of everything that has ever been true but unwelcome. What the avoidant also cannot fully suppress, no matter how sophisticated their defenses, is the specific quality of regret that attaches itself to a loss of this nature. Not all regret is equal. There is a regret that arises from losing something ordinary, a manageable regret, one that carries some sadness but does not fundamentally alter one's sense of the world's possibilities. And then there is the regret of recognizing, too late, that something rare was in your hands and you opened your hands because you did not understand, until the moment of opening, how rare it was. The avoidant is living inside the second kind, and the second kind does not soften with time the way the first kind does. It sharpens, because time does not bring replacement, and the absence of replacement is daily, ongoing confirmation of the rarity of what was lost. Every week that passes without encountering the specific quality of connection that you represented adds another layer to a regret that the avoidant will carry for far longer than anyone looking at their composed exterior would ever imagine possible. They will not tell you this. They may never tell anyone this. They may never fully admit it to themselves in the direct, unambiguous language that it deserves. But it is present. It is active. It is one of the dominant shaping forces in their interior life. This regret that has no acceptable outlet, no socially legible expression, no path toward resolution that their psychology currently allows them to walk. And then there is the question of what they do with all of this, how the avoidant behaves in the external world while carrying this invisible weight. Because the behavior, when you see it, may look like further confirmation that they are fine, and it is important to understand what the behavior actually represents. Some avoidants respond to this internal pressure through increased activity, filling the calendar, pursuing new connections with an energy that looks, from the outside, like someone thriving in their freedom. This is not thriving. This is the avoidance version of running. The same mechanism they used throughout the relationship when closeness became too threatening, now deployed against the threatening closeness of their own grief. Busyness is a very old and very reliable tool in the avoidance psychological kit. It creates the illusion of forward movement, while the actual internal work of processing remains entirely undone. Others withdraw further, not from you specifically, since you are no longer there to withdraw from, but from the world generally. A subtle retraction of engagement that the people around them may notice as a low mood or a flatness, without understanding its source. This is the avoidant turning the management of their internal pressure inward in a way that begins to affect their baseline functioning, their capacity for pleasure, their interest in ordinary things, their ability to be genuinely present in experiences that would previously have held their attention without difficulty. Neither response is fine. Both responses are the observable surface of a person who is not fine, behaving in the ways that not fine presents when it has nowhere safe to go. You need to understand something about what all of this means for you. Not for what it implies about possible futures, that is not the point. The point is what it means for the story you have been telling yourself about your own significance, about whether what you shared was real, about whether you were to them what they were to you. You were, in all the ways that matter, in all the ways that leave marks, in all the ways that distinguish a person who genuinely reached them from the many people who moved through their life without ever getting close enough to the interior of them to register as a true loss. The avoidance composure is not evidence of your interchangeability. It is evidence of their limitation, the limitation of a person who was taught, long before you arrived, that feeling things visibly was dangerous, and who has been paying the price of that teaching every day since, in the specific currency of connections that were real, and losses that were genuine, and grief that had nowhere to go and so went underground, where it waits in the dark for the day, if it ever comes, when they are finally, genuinely ready to feel it. They are not fine. They are performing fine with the skill of someone who has been practicing the performance their entire life. And beneath the performance, beneath the composure and the self-sufficiency and the carefully maintained appearance of someone who needed nothing and therefore lost nothing, there is a person sitting inside the specific, irreplaceable shape of your absence, feeling it, refusing to name it, paying, in the private currency of unwitnessed grief, the full cost of every choice they made that led to the moment you went quiet and did not come back. That is not fine. That is the avoidant in the most honest version of themselves that they are capable of being right now, alone with a loss they caused, in a silence they chose, wishing, in the wordless way of people who have forgotten the language of their own longing, that things had gone differently. They are not fine. And somewhere beneath your own grief, in the place where you have always known the truth about them more clearly than they have ever known it about themselves. You already knew that.